The million dollar question: how do entrepreneurs transition from self-employed to owning a business that turns a profit? My name is Chris Waters, and this podcast has the million dollar answer. Welcome to CEO Secrets. Hey, it's your host, Chris Waters with CEO Secrets. I've got a special guest on today. He does not need any introduction if you're in the real estate world. Brad Inman, welcome to the show.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for having me. I assume you're in your living room or your house, and I thank you for inviting me over.
Yes, I am. I'm in my home office right now. How are you doing?
But I've been lucky. I started with a room in a house with an old lady and shared a bathtub. But so I love real estate, so I'm lucky. I am in Southern California in the desert, Palm Springs.
Okay, great. And your family, everybody's healthy?
Everybody, the only thing that's happened, a lot of anxiety, different times, up and downs, like everybody. That the only thing that suffered with me being here was I threw my Rumba, the vacuum cleaner, into the swimming pool because I determined there's technology that we need, and then there's technology that we don't need. And one of the greatest inventions of humankind was the broom, and I love to sweep. So the Rumba's in the pool, and the pool guy is coming soon, and he'll probably ask me about it.
Oh, that's too funny. Well, you have, for anybody that is not familiar with your work and what you do in the real estate industry, you've got the leading digital resource online for the real estate industry called Inman News. And you have a fairly large event that happens every July. Obviously, that's, the coronavirus had a big impact on events. I mean, you have close to 5,000 people that typically show up, and you've got all those employees. Like, what kind of impact has that had for your business?
Well, I was a consumer writer, Chris, you may not know this, but in the 80s, my beat was California real estate. I really wrote about the clash between development and environmentalism. It's when I learned about haters. That clash was so intense that it prepared me well for the internet, because you get, when you're active in the media, you get a lot of people that disagree with you. Good civil debate, but some haters. But that was quite an event. When the environmental movement took off, real estate, the population of California was growing. So I was a consumer writer. I kind of accidentally fell into B2B writing for the real estate industry just when the internet came around. I had a story about a scandal at the National Association of Realtors, and my editors for LA Times, big newspapers, they said no one really cares about. They don't know what NAR is, and they didn't care. It wasn't really a consumer story. It was like a $27 million tech scandal. So I was probably one of the first bloggers. I put it in the internet. And guess who was there? Buyer's agents, because realtors are opportunistic and find things. They find technology, use it. We always hear about adoption. Yes, for the vast majority, there's slow adoption, but for a small cohort, there's really aggressive adoption. Mm-hmm. And so there were those people. And then Remax agents at the time were the most professional, and they were adopting technology. And suddenly I found that there was a business-to-business audience. And then after about a year into it, I gathered a group of 50 people who believed, like I did, that tech could change the industry. And I took them up to the Sonoma Woods outdoors. We literally had blankets and hand warmers, and we discussed things like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we put all the listings on the internet? Hey, wouldn't it be great if we had an automated transaction? Hey, wouldn't it be great if we had virtual walkthroughs? And we had a guy from Canada bring this huge thing that looked like a spaceship that did a 360-degree walkthrough in 1996. And that grew into quite an enterprise, the events, the news. We have a really incredible team, a team that, by the way, has worked virtual for 4 years. Wow. We closed Inman's office of 30 years, and we have people working from all over the world. And I'll tell you about working from home if people haven't gotten it. Productivity goes up, morale is higher, and it's much easier to recruit because young people like a quality of life. They want to be near their children. And who the hell wants to commute? So for us, it's been for 4 years, and great for us. When this hit, we were able to serve our readers instantly because we were already at home, already working from home. We didn't have that transition.
So when you plan one of these big events, 5,000 people, that's a lot of that. It's multiple days. It's almost a week long, 5 days long. What are those workers? Are they W-2 employees? Do you bring in volunteers? Are they?
No, we have a team of people that run the event. And then of course we used to have a lot of people at the reg desk, and they were temp people from the city we were in. But now we have, if you've been lately, we have robots. They're called iPad robots. You automatically register, and no one likes to wait in line. It's always been my constant bad argument. no lines, no lines, no lines. And now we have robots that do registration, and there's never been a line in 4 years since we started using robots. So robots play a role, not in everything, but they certainly play a role.
So then for the most part, the coronavirus, it hasn't really impacted your employees and writers, and everybody's still working. You didn't have to furlough anybody.
Yeah, I manage my businesses really well, and I don't want to overstate it, but and I have a great one. I don't run the company. I'm lucky enough to own it and haven't given it away over the years, but I have one of the best digital media groups, anywhere in the world. I mean, these came from Curbed and Vox Media, and they're really a bunch of incredible people running Inman News, and they manage the business really, really well. So we went into this in a good position, and we leaned into the journalism and editorial side and the events and the virtual event. And so we haven't laid off anybody.
How many subscribers does Inman News have now?
I think 40 or 50,000 subscribers and 1 million readers.
Wow. 40 to 50 subscribers. So what's the average subscription? I think, I'm a paying member. It's like $60 a year, I think, or something like that.
You got a deal. It's $199 full retail.
$199 full retail. Okay.
I guess it's like a negotiated commission. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I signed up when y'all had some promo or something. So
yeah, we have a lot of promos. I mean, the beauty of Inman is we have a multiple source revenue model. A lot of even digital media companies are in trouble because they rely only on advertising. Mm-hmm. We have this incredible blend of events, subscriptions, which is reoccurring revenue. We have an incredible retention rate, very low churn, and we also have a really good, robust advertising. In fact, advertising is going up right now in our business. So we're just really well positioned.
What's your total revenue for Inman News, Brad?
I'd have to check. We don't disclose it. We're a private company. So,
well, I mean, you can do rough math, 40, 50,000 users times, whatever the minimum fee is.
Yeah, that's just
really well.
That'd be just one source of revenue. You'd have to dig into the other stuff.
Not including all the sponsorships and all the other good stuff.
The good news is we only have one shareholder, and that shareholder we're very responsive to. And
and I think his name might be Brad Inman.
Yeah, and everything's looking pretty good, I think.
You have had.
I want to be very careful here. We've taken a blow like everybody. We had to cancel 2 physical events, but the company's really on sound footing. We lean in. I've been lucky to go through a few recessions, and I always lean in. The key in a recession or downturn or any kind of event is to come out the other end as whole as you can with your infrastructure. Because if you do and you're liquid enough to do that, then the opportunity is just endless. Last time we dusted our competitors when, in terms of, just getting right out ahead of everybody.
Like, who do you consider a competitor at this point? Like,
I don't wake up thinking about it, never have, and I never, ever badmouth any. I've had a lot of businesses in my life that I've never, that's not been my practice. There's some B2B publications that do a really good job.
Anybody specific in real estate?
Well, Steve Murray and Riz Media have been around a long time. But, the quality of our journalists, these are people from really good journalism schools, well trained in journalism. The beauty of Inman, no one can own shares in Inman. None of our reporters can own shares in real estate related companies or tech companies. Even our contributors must disclose. We really believe in this idea of independence. And so we can, do what we want. We've probably suffered economically by not selling Newshole or selling stage time. We've made some mistakes, but we're really religious about not doing that. And, that's where our cred comes from. And these are real journalists that really, really know how to do journalism the old-fashioned way.
I got introduced to Inman News about 3-4 years ago as an indie broker, and heard you speak. And I feel like one of your superpowers as a business owner is your ability to entertain and speak on stage. Is that something that just came to you naturally, or how did you pick that up?
No, a good story. I was a young man and I was a writer and, a journalist, nerdy writer. And there's an old saying. It used to be, if you're a CEO, you're a terrible public speaker. And there used to be a saying, if you're a journalist, you're even a worse public speaker. And my editor was on a panel in Riverside, California, not too far from where I am today. And he got sick. And it was some economic forum, because I used to write a lot about economics and, big trends. I used to write, back in the day, I even wrote a policy column for the LA Times about business and policy. I mean, back in the day, there was journalism covering these weighty issues, and we don't see a lot of it now. But he got sick and he goes, Inman, you're going to this. I was scared to death. I remember driving with sweat on my hands. It's kind of like when we have new kids in the block, whenever I shake their hands, they're sweating like I was that day. And I was scared to death. And I get in a panel with an experienced reporter who also happened to be quite entertaining, and me and this other really boring guy. And so there was three of us. There was one good speaker on the panel and two really bad ones. And I drove back. What I noticed is when he got off stage, everyone wanted to talk to him. So there's a little bit of ego and vanity, but more importantly, as a reporter, if everyone wants to talk to you as a journalist, that means you get better information and you can deliver better news and information to your readers, because our duty is to our readers, and I've always felt that way. But I was impressed. So I literally went back, all my way back, and I started reading and reading how to be a good public speaker. I had index cards of quotes and data and statistics. I had no money, but I paid, I'll never forget, I paid $4,000 to go to a video training thing. I went to Toastmasters for a while. I knew that if you could get on stage and deliver a half-assed, pretty good speech, there was a lot of value being created for yourself and your business and as a reporter. And so, you know, in my early mid-20s, I obsessed. Like I did everything in my life. I'm pretty kicked back now. I buy one-way tickets. I don't have a calendar. I don't have a clock. But back in the day, I was obsessed by everything I did. I had, 6 things I wanted to accomplish, and I was lucky I was able to, but I was obsessed. And I was obsessed about being good on stage. And it came great benefit, just like anything. I mean, there are people, I guess, that are naturals at stuff in life. I've never been a natural. Like, I guess someone once said that Tiger Woods was a natural. Well, he was a natural, but he worked really hard.
Right.
So well, I don't buy that. You get gifts that just are landed in your lap.
So you've had, as an entrepreneur, you've had just, an exceptional career to say the least. Started Inman News in '96, and then in the late '90s, you started HomeGain, a marketing platform to deliver buyer and seller leads to agents. And you sold that in 2005. When you think about Inman and you think about HomeGain, what were was there an inflection point or like something you did from a tactical perspective to, just have that rocket ship growth with both of those companies?
I go back 2 things. I had a stint as I chaired the Microsoft Home Advisor creation, and I got to work with all the Microsofties, and these are people that are still friends, an amazing group of people. That was Microsoft in its heyday, and we were all at, in Bellevue at what they call it, Red West, which was the digital thing. I was writing for the LA Times and a lot, and the editor there, the business editor, went to Microsoft because they peeled off a bunch of journalists, and he grabbed me. And I had done a database because I was big into databases. I had a Q&A database where someone could read an article, ask a question, phone in the question, leave it in voicemail, pre-internet. We would transcribe it and we'd send it back. In fact, I learned early on, I had consumer shows back in the day with big metropolitan newspapers because I'd get letters from readers asking me about real estate, and they didn't trust their own real estate people. They wanted independent source, a third party. And I started a consumer event with the San Francisco Examiner. We expected a few hundred people. 5,000 people lined up 10 blocks.
Wow.
The demand for independent consumer information in real estate was overwhelming. And that launched all kinds of businesses. I wound up delivering a Q&A to Microsoft, helping with Home Advisor. But then I watched Microsoft and I learned about product development and everything else. And I always had, venture capitalists. I've always been lucky coming to me, Brad, would you do this? Would you do this? Would you start a business? And I just decided to go for it. So I left Inman News, kept a big firewall between me and the company. It was too much, though. That's why our policy now is no cross investment in real estate or anything, because it perceived conflict that I didn't like. But what I learned then is venture money was, easy to come by. It was pre-dot-com crash. There was a lot of opportunity in online real estate. And if you look at HomeGain, it's not all me. I had an unbelievable team of people like we do at Inman. And they saw what became the blueprint for Zillow. In fact, TCV, which had invested in HomeGain, flipped as soon as we sold HomeGain, and they made a pile of money, and they invested in Rich Barton. And I met Rich at Home Advisor at Microsoft. I never forget, he walked into a room, and I was pitching, real estate online, and he came in and he said, he's working on an idea called Travel Online, and he launched Expedia there, and that's where I got to know him. And, that entrepreneuring was always in me, is always in my blood. So I always loved content, I love journalism, but I love this other piece of the puzzle.
So
trick to it all. But
I think it said I was trying to research this online just to learn more about HomeGain. It said you raised, I think it was 53 million. Is that accurate? 53
yeah,
million for
closer
HomeGain?
to like 40, I think. Yeah.
And then what did you guys sell HomeGain for?
We've never disclosed that, but we all made a good chunk of change. I got very lucky at a young age.
So the big kind of,
You look at that blueprint, Chris. I say we invented the home valuation. And the way I got it, I learned about a guy in Orange County doing B2B for banks, home valuations. And I told my BD guy, a really great guy, Dan Martin, I said, let's go license that. Let's slap a consumer face on and let's put ads saying you can get your stock scores, your stock quotes every day, but you can't get your home val. And the guy wanted 150 per call. And Dan Martin came and said, Brad, he wants $150 per call. I said, we're not going to give him 150. He goes, well, how much are you willing to give him? And I said, 15 cents. And that Dan Martin, he was a dog. He cut deals with Google and Yahoo and everybody. We had such a talented crew. And we wound up getting it, I think, for 50 cents a call. And I love that guy because he was just a nerdy tech guy in real estate producing these home valuations for banks. And but we had lead generation. It was the blueprint for Zillow, and we all did really well. So I probably my only regret for the team that we had pulled together is keeping together longer. But we've all worked on many enterprises together. Mm-hmm. In fact, the other day I just got a check in the mail from a couple guys that worked with me at HomeGain who went on and started 2 companies. And somewhere along the way, they said, would you be an advisor? I had forgotten about it. And they sold the company and I got this check. So that community of people, if anything motivates me in life, it's that pool of characters that I've been lucky enough to work with on many, many different companies and seeing them do well. And, one guy said, they all graduated from Indian University. I don't know what that is exactly, but that's why I do what I do. It's product I love, and I love teams of people.
So Inman News, so a big growth catalyst was the live events. And then with HomeGain, what was your distribution channel or big catalyst, if you will, to help?
The home valuation. We put that up there and people flocked to it.
Okay.
But I'll tell you a great story. I don't think I've shared this too often, but right before the dot-com bust, 6 months before, my CFO, Andrew Coleman, super bright guy who went on to do amazing things even after HomeGain, he said to me, you know what it's costing us, Brad? And you hear this now when people criticize Compass and Zillow and everybody with their earnings reports. He goes, we're acquiring customers for $480. And you know how much we're making off of them? $12. And what we did, we had a reverse auction. We had the home light model. That's what we had, where you could get a good realtor, but the consumer would go and anonymously display their vitals, leave their address off, and agents would bid on, not just with commission, but with qualifications. But we were acquiring customers through the top of the funnel with the home valuation, where homeowners, hoping to convert them to sellers, but the conversion rate was low. But Andrew said, let's cut off our TV radio advertising. And we cut off $3 million a month. Now, you know what my VC said? What a VC would have told a startup 3 months ago. You can't do that. Grow, grow, grow. We'll fund the next round. If you talk to startups now, and I've interviewed a lot in my podcast and said, what are your VCs telling you? Well, in January, they said, grow, grow at all costs. We'll fund you. And now they're saying, we won't fund you and you got to get profitable. And that's how VCs operate. If you raise venture capital, I love them. We need them. But they can be super jerks. My VCs were good. And they said, Brad, we don't believe you should do this, but go for it. Now, that 9 months, Chris, of not putting out $3.5 million a month allowed us in that round we raised in December to come out of the dot-com bust with about $35-40 million in our bank. And I had an incredible operator, like I do now, the CEO of Inman, Josh Albertson, a guy named John Baker. And John operated that thing so tight and so close that we had time to get it right. And what we did is switched to lead generation and a marketing platform. We already had the realtors. We had, I think, 40,000 registered. And we made it really easy for them. And then the business just went like this. And our revenue, we never had to raise another round. And then we had an incredibly profitable and a valuable asset, the classified venture. But that, I'll never forget Andrew Coleman coming in and saying, stop it. Because what would have happened? Chris, think about it. I would have spent $27-30 million and I would have had a few $1 million left. And that would have run out because it took us another 2 years to get profitable. The other thing that happened, and this can happen now in that dot-com bust, there was a lot of carnage. A lot of the VC-backed startups that couldn't get that next round had to sell. We bought about 10 of them. One I bought, get this, I got they had $600,000 in cash, and we gave them warrants, and we got their cash. And those deals happen because the VCs want to put on a good face, when they sell.
What do you think are going to be the casualties of COVID-19 in the real estate space? Like what, if you had a crystal ball, which companies specifically do you see shutting down?
Well, I think surprising, and not surprising really, that some of the SaaS software companies are doing better than I thought. I've been pushing them as I interview them to tell me, are you seeing higher churn for the subscription models? What's the take rate on new product features? And we're in this hard period. We're in the middle of it, right? We're in the middle of the fire. So you don't know which part of the house will burn down. But it looks to me like some of these software companies that have taken their platforms and taken their relationships and been able to deliver some of the new tools. Like I think Boomtown's doing that. I know that Cloud CMA seems to be doing that, where they can, integrate virtual showings. They can view some of these automated pieces of the digital puzzle that you can tell customers want. And I think some of the others are going to struggle if they don't have that agility or the versatility, or they don't have an agile enough platform to add some of those features. And I don't know whose those might be, but more than anything, I'll tell you what happens. It's when you raise money, Chris. It's the luck of the draw. Yaz and I have been watching this movie, Hollywood. There's a lot of luck in Hollywood when you land a role. And there's a lot of luck here. I raised that big chunk of change at HomeGain 6 months before the dot-com crash. Wow. If I had been in the middle of raising a round when the dot-com crashed, there would be no HomeGain. There would have been a sale. Mm-hmm. And so I feel for the entrepreneurs because it's kind of the luck of the draw and timing. Who would have known that this would happen? But if you got some dry powder in there, as I interviewed recently, Rich Spencer and Rich and Barton and Pete Flint, and they all said, and I agree, the greatest period of innovation is in a period like this. Yeah. And there's going to be some unbelievable, but you got to have cash. I always say passion, brains, and money got us to the moon. And that's the three things you have to do a startup. It's just not easy doing a startup.
Is there any one specific behemoth that if you had to guess, like maybe in the next year or next decade, that would surprise us that closes its doors?
Well, I think the elephant in the room without Ryan Snyder would be Realogy. Right. And it's because it was about what happened with Sendent back in the day. If you look at Compass's blueprint, they took the blueprint of Sendent. So he came in and he acquired all the brands to get 25% market share. If you look what Robert Refkin did, CEO, founder of Compass, he said, I'm going to get 20% market share overnight. And he did it with lots of capital. But then what happened? They sold that thing for $9 billion in 2006, Chris. And they strapped the new company. They sold to Apollo. And like all private equity companies, they strapped the company with the debt. It's not like I borrow to buy the company, I pay it back. I put it on the company. And so billions of dollars Richard Smith had to plow through. But what happened during that period? Think about it. They were paralyzed with that debt and the downturn. Mm-hmm. And so they couldn't innovate. And what happened? That's when Zillow and that's when Trulia got in. And they used to always say, oh, we got that covered. We did a deal with Trulia and Zillow. But what happened? Coldwell Banker and even Remax back then, they weren't part of that collection. But Century 21, if you went onto the internet, the three top portals were those big real estate brands. Yep. Now they're nowhere to be found. So then Realogy with no money was forced to do a deal with Zillow and with Realtor.com, and they gave up that, and so they couldn't innovate. So they became lethargic with all kinds of problems, all kinds of office space, all kinds of debt that they still worked out. But so that would be a bet maybe. But what's happening? I actually think leadership in these situations can get us out of these messes. And so I think that Ryan Snyder is the best thing that ever happened to that company, but he's honest about it. It's a slow climb. It's funny when I hear people complain about Compass, and I'm not defending Compass. I have no reason other than one, they took their blueprint from Realogy, and two, because Realogy was on its heels, made it easier for Compass to grab share. Mm-hmm. You start listening to the quarterly earnings reports from Richard Smith about 3 or 4 years ago, and he talks about them stealing share. Well, if you go back 20 years ago, you could hear the old brands whining about Realogy taking share unfairly. And it was so unfair. It was just they were taking share.
So, what
Because I
was
need to
the,
turn this around. You need to tell me what you disagree on, because you're a smart guy.
well, I mean, I agree with you that, Realogy is having issues. I think that the consumer, they don't care about the brand, and like for whatever reason, one thing, Brad, we have in common is you started writing about real estate the year I was born. So
Wow.
I say that because one, that was a great year, but two, I have
You're
limited,
half my age and twice as smart.
no,
Wow,
no,
Chris.
no. I,
By the way, let's not skip over what I said about Schneider. I think Schneider may save that thing from what could be a demise.
well,
But go
so
ahead.
I say that because I have a limited scope of knowledge, if you will. And
Yeah.
so what I understand is, so 1975, National Association of Realtors welcomed salespeople. NAR
Yep.
membership quadruples overnight. And these brand-centric companies, Remax, Keller Williams, et cetera, start blowing up in the late 70s, early mid-80s. And, it's like all of the risks got shifted over to the agents, and it was just this very agent-centric industry in the 80s and 90s. And then, early 2000s, you, Brad Inman, are leading the way ahead of everybody and making it more of a technology focused industry. So what I'm kind of curious about is like pre, late 1970s, like what did the industry look like? Like what were the, Warren Buffett, like all these people say, or what's his name? Ray Dalio, the book Principles. He always says,
Yeah.
there's things, you can look at patterns from historical patterns and they're going to happen again. Like what are the historical patterns you can look at from early 1900s to like the 1970s, from a real estate perspective that could maybe tell you what might hold, be
Well,
it.
my parents bought a house for $30,000, Chris, in 1949, and they sold it in 1980 for $30,000. And so there's a couple things that happened. Real estate as an asset class became hyperinflated and became more important to the everyday consumer, but it also got financialized like everything in our economy. And I'm taking us post that period. But a lot of people like Ray, you mentioned that. I've watched him a lot lately talking about the 50s, that when there wasn't racial equality at all, but there was more economic equality. It is a time when we also spent an incredible ratio of per capita on public investment on the war, like now, but there was that decade of economic equality where my dad, owning a small retail shop, probably only made 2 or 3 times as much as his highest paid clerk.
Yep.
When Wall, and this is part of a story I wrote today, this financialization of the U.S. economy, which real estate was part of. If you think about the secondary market, incredible amounts of capital and lots of money being made around that, flowing into mortgages, the appetite for this asset class by consumers, but also by fiduciaries and others. And if you think about real estate, it just mapped to that. The structure in the industry mapped to that asset class having more value. I mean, it used to be, think about the media. There was a carpenter, a teacher, a policeman, and a reporter. And they were all the same. They all got paid working class wages, and they all served a community role and duty. They weren't living in the Hamptons making hundreds of millions of dollars, whether it be Fox or whether it be CNN, broadcasting their fame and fortune. Things used to be simpler in that decade. If you go back to that's why I like right now, we're going back to some of those values. I don't want to be Pollyannish because I think this is more complicated.
So are you predicting that potentially we see a redistribution of wealth?
Now that goes into a danger zone. What I wrote today is, if you look, I just finished a book, Dark Towers, about the history of Deutsche Bank, and I didn't read it because of the relationship with Donald Trump. I just love the writer. And he's now written wrote a book before that about the LIBOR scandal. And you just look at the role of private equity, and you look at the role with private equity and Sendit and Realogy, and you see there's this layer of wealth being created that's taken away from those that are just creating value, true value. And I think it's not a social, and I'm not arguing for socialism or getting rid of capitalism. I'm just saying, let's be honest about the financialization of our economy and the cost of that, and how by that very act, it's distributed unfairly, probably to people on the Wall Street side. And then they in turn rewarded CEOs. So that gap between no accountability, incredible tax loopholes, and the people creating the value. Like in real estate, I think always the average realtor is created the most value. But as you said, they're getting burdened and burdened with more of the cost. If you look at digital marketing and digital media, and we did it at HomeGain, the realtors paid for everything. The realtors pay for the brokers, they pay for the franchises, they pay for Zillow. I mean, Zillow has a market cap, not because of the deal with Realogy. They have that market cap because of all those realtors paying them all those fees. And that is kind of like the overall economic picture. There's the people at the bottom have been carrying too much weight, and a lot of the weight they're carrying, the value creation is going to a small group of people.
Well, I think
I don't mean, am I getting political or I don't?
No, not at all. And I agree. I agree 100% with you, but I don't think anything is going to change unless the global currency is no longer the US dollar. And
yeah,
I think
then you get into a zone where I'm unqualified. You're above my pay grade. I mean, I know the theories and I read about them, but that could be the case, Chris. But I'll leave that to you.
Yeah,
I'm still a simple son of a retailer.
Hey, I have this segment of the podcast called Show Me the Money. I have a feeling you're not going to answer me, but I have to ask. What's been your biggest exit? What's been your biggest financial exit as an entrepreneur, Brad?
Well, Inman's been a profitable company for 30 years. So
I guess
a friend of mine's Craig Neimark, and I'm not in his league, but he's a dear friend of mine. He started in the Bay Area when I did. And people used to ask Craig, why aren't you selling? Well, Craig gets to exit every day because it's cash flow positive. My dad used to say more bills than this, but I did well with HomeGain. I did well with my work at Microsoft. I did well.
Was HomeGain your biggest exit?
What are you talking about? Financially, spiritually, emotionally?
I mean, yeah, financially, like from an M&A perspective, what's been the biggest financial exit?
Yeah, that was definitely, I got very lucky.
Was it in 8 figures or 9 figures?
That's none of your business, Chris.
I told you I was going to try. And you also,
small town boy, I did very well. I'm very lucky.
You were also involved with Curbed, right? Which was acquired by Vox Media.
I was chair of Curbed, and I was an early investor with some really incredible people, and very lucky. And what I'm really lucky is these long-term relationships. I don't know about you, Chris, but everything I do, I always say these are family assets. It's a long-term. And I work with those guys at Curbed, and now they all work at Inman.
There's a lot of people that watch this that I think look at you as like this beacon of light, and they want to follow in your footsteps.
Oh, I don't know, beacon of light. I've made mistakes, lots of them, son.
Well, I mean, but you've had the sale of HomeGain. Inman News has been crushing it for a long time. Curbed, Microsoft, and probably a plethora I don't even know about, advisory roles, etc. So with that being said, I'm kind of curious what, there's T360, right, which studies all of the
great group. I love Stefan. He's a super bright guy.
Yeah, they study, I think he's tracking like 2,000 plus companies or something, yeah. Right? In serving the real estate brokerage industry. It seems like, are there any opportunities right now, or is it like actually over, like the market's being overwhelmed and there needs to be consolidation? Like, do you see what's your opinion?
It's always consolidation. I know, Chris, you have a big faction here of teams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My thesis on themes, whenever there's disruption, there's consolidation. There's consolidation by the old guard. Mm-hmm. And we already saw that in real estate prior to this. You saw a lot of brokers who, eked out no margin at all and were acquired by Compass. And some of those sales, best we can get, there wasn't too much consideration given to the owners and companies that you thought might be worth a fortune because there's a gloss over them. So that whole group was suffering. But let's look at teams. I would argue that teams are consolidation at the lowest level of the value chain because of disruption. I, as a single agent, can't afford all this stuff. I can't perform as successfully as I could. I need to merge with other agents. The greatest example in M&A and real estate is teams. That wasn't like, oh, teams are better, or teams good. Teams was a reaction to disruption, or a reaction to this layering of the cost on the agent that we just talked about.
Yep.
So that's where I think you see it. I think you also are going to see companies go under. You're going to see what we call acqui-hires. You're going to see .coms go under. You're going to see brokers merge. At the highest level, the big cats, and I only mention Realogy because they're a publicly traded company. We see their balance sheet. We see all their challenges, but there are others. It looks like some are positioned really well. You can't really dig into KW because it's a private company, and Gary's like I am. Remax you can, and Remax looks to be really healthy. So this idea that EXP, it seems, I don't know, they're publicly traded. You can get their balance sheet and their earnings. Then the mid-tier, the big brokers with big warehouse space, maybe this is a gift because they can finally eliminate the cost in their cost structure. Inman went virtual 4 years ago, and freak set of circumstances between Slack and Zoom and everything else. Our productivity went up, our morale went up, and our recruiting was unbelievably easier. And I got rid of Big Bertha copier, and everyone knows, like in an M&A deal, you know what the biggest piece of paper in an M&A deal is? Your damn lease. And next to that is your license with the damn IBM copier and the IT. It was, it's like throwing my Rumba in the swimming pool and using a broom. That goddamn copier, I want to throw it in a pool. People use it to make copies of their concert tickets, and some old guys, their emails, and some even put their face in it when they're probably on drugs. So getting rid of that and being efficient and lean, I think you're going to see that in real estate, and that might actually save some broker owners. What's harder though, I always said the real estate that they all had was to warehouse bad agents, and that either inefficient or efficient model, that's always the big question. Does that go away?
Yeah.
And that affects consolidation, I think. And then could Agile more? I don't know. It's a big, it's hard to figure this thing out.
Brad, you published something recently called "The Right Way to Do Wrong."
Yeah.
Right. I'm curious, what are some names of every time I've heard you speak on stage and read anything you've written, I feel like you're try to be politically correct, I guess is the right word. That's always my opinion. Like, I feel like you're always trying to play nice to everybody. The one exception would be, and see, like, I even think you did this when you brought Gary Keller on stage. Like, you really did a great job keeping your cool with Gary Keller, and you probably want him to come back. But I thought that was like a very heated, probably one of the most amazing sessions I've ever been to.
Humbling.
It was amazing, but
that was an epic interview.
Yeah,
and one reason, a lot of people don't agree with you, Chris, that I'm nicer, but there were a lot of broker owners that over the years, and I think that crowd in particular, because at HomeGain we kind of went after them because we went directly to the agent and peeled off the top of the commission. That means the broker had to give something to HomeGain with, in their view, no benefit, even though the agents loved it, right? And what we wrote at Inman over the years, and I said a lot of things about the broken link in the value chain being the broker owner, and what value are they delivering? And many are friends and part of the Inman community, but there were some that didn't like that I would nail everybody on stage as a journalist, which I thought my role was to try to represent the person from Omaha in the plastic chair. I was there to represent them. So I asked what I thought were tough questions. Maybe they were too nice and politically correct.
Well, I guess from my, because I don't swing anybody's flag, right? I'm not with Keller Williams or any big brand name. I'm an independent broker using this team-centric model. And so, like, I see, it's like you represent the person that's not in the room, no matter who that is. So, like, if you're in
right. But there are a lot of broker owners that were really sick and tired of me, and I know that for a fact. And the beauty of the Gary Keller interview was Gary shut me down, and they may not like Gary Keller. In fact, many I know well who don't like Gary Keller. Suddenly, Gary Keller became their hero because I was like, after 20 years, someone finally shut Brad Inman up. So all of that for me was humbling, and every road to self-awareness, you got to have some humbling, experiences. You have to make mistakes, and if you don't learn from it, it's your fault. But and I've made a few,
Well, so let me ask something. So to that book's title, "The Right Way to Do Wrong," I'm curious, who are some people you really dislike in the industry? Like companies or individuals in the industry you really, really dislike because they're doing things the wrong way?
I'll lump a few. Okay. Larry Page, 2000, calls me, co-founder of Google. Mm-hmm. It says, Mr. Inman, he actually called me that. He goes, we're noticing a lot of people are searching real estate on Google, and I don't know anything about it. Can I come to your conference? And I said, sure. And he came, and we let him speak, and he wasn't a good speaker, and he was kind of nerdy and awkward. And as he was speaking, I was standing next to an old school broker, and I'll just use the prototypical old school broker. Tie, little paunch, blue suit. He said, Inman, where'd you get that guy? You bring in all these guys that are just useless. And here's another one, Doug Lebda, who sold Lending Tree for $700 million to Barry Diller, rebought it back for a lot less and is worth billions, his company. He was on stage when he founded his company, because we always invite them. They're part of the Inman community. And Doug gives his little speech about what he's going to do. And not the same broker, but the same profile, same suit, same frowny face, same, this is all bullshit, Inman. But somehow they're there. And he says, how many transactions have you done, Lebda? And Doug said 4. And that's how many he had done. And I can go on and on and on. So that prototypical, no change, no technology adoption, no innovation, no trying to serve the consumer better, not serving often their agents very well, taking a lot out of the system for many years, kind of like newspapers did. Newspapers were high margin, very profitable businesses. So were broker owners.
Brad, this is what I'm saying. You're being politically correct. I need names. I need business names, specifics.
Well, yeah, I don't like to call out people unfairly, but
come on now.
No, I'm not going to do that. That's not my I'll call them out on stage, but I'm not going to call them out. Yeah. By the way, if you read Inman News every day, we report on it factually, not with opinion, not with color commentary. We report every day on earnings and how companies are doing and companies are acquired. And, you just go through the list of the Compass acquisitions, and these were kind of heroes of the industry. They look like great companies, and everyone thought, and they're good personalities and people in them. I don't want to denigrate them. That's why I don't want to mention names. But those companies were bought. I mean, he didn't overpay for much. The guy that actually overpaid, Henry Silverman, he paid $800 million for Coldwell Banker. When brands, by the way, when brands meant something, and you look at that history, Chris, the change here, Google's a brand of habit, right? Expedia is a brand of habit. Zillow's a brand of habit. Century 21, Coldwell Banker were never consumer brands of habit. I didn't go back to Century 21 every day to get information. They were just flashed on TV. Oh, it's Coldwell Banker. And that was the day of brand value equating to consumer action. Now we have, with the digital world, brands of habit, and brands of habit win.
Brad, so you don't invest in any real estate specific companies, so you don't have a conflict of interest. So what are you investing in now?
Well, right now I'm pretty, I'm enjoying cash. I am sitting on the sidelines like a lot of people. I like real estate. I always have. Every
time I've been within an ear length's distance of hearing you speak, I always learn about some new property you have. I know you've got a place in, is it Sonoma or near the Russian River?
Well, you've done your research, Chris.
You've got a place in Palm Beach, place in Palm Springs, New York. Where else? Tell us people that like real estate.
That's a bit, no longer New York, West Hollywood, LA. And, looking now, I mean, real estate served me well. I like real estate. I just like buying real estate. If nothing else, I have a story that comes out of me using my agent. Like I did a deal in Palm Springs, which I love to talk about. You probably heard it. It was dual agency. It was a, what do you call it? The quiet listings or the pocket. It was a pocket listing. It was dual agency. And the seller was a couple that were in the middle of a breakup. And the last piece, I got my agent through Zillow thinking that the agent was the listing agent. And I bring it up to Rich Barton and everybody. I was bamboozled by Zillow. I actually walked into the house with the agent thinking he was the listing agent. And when I bought in Florida, I went online, realtor.com, and the first guy to respond, a dumb Brad, as my wife loves to say, Mr. Real Estate Expert. And I get online, I fill out the form, and the first guy to respond is a young, eager guy. And I went to the site. he said, I can get there in an hour. And I thought, oh, okay. And I was there. And so I wait an hour and meet him. I think he's the listing agent. Get the story on him. He had his license for 30 days. He had never in his life visited Palm Beach, ever. And I, for a minute, think he's my listing agent. And in walks another realtor. And I finally put 2 and 2 together. So I, on stage, always confront those guys. Like, if you don't think this is deceptive, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You need to get this right. So even Brad Inman, has a couple of French fries and a Happy Meal. He should know whether that's the listing agent or not. And this young guy that came an hour from, had never been to Palm Beach. And I just tell those stories just because, every time I buy real estate, I have a ton of stories. It's the first deal I ever did here where I called my lawyer and I said, you got to handle this. I can't talk to any of these people because it's not going to go well.
Are you looking for distressed assets or places you like to visit?
Yeah, for us, it's more about that.
Where do you?
And I don't want to overstate some big, I'm not a big shot real estate mogul. These are, my brother once, lucky enough, he was very successful at Price Waterhouse. And someone said, how big is your house? And he said, 3 bedroom, 1 bedroom in New York, 1 bedroom in Miami, and 1 bedroom in Scotland. And that's Yaz and I. We don't have big houses. They're small. I've never had a big mansion. I don't have any of that. They're modest houses in cool neighborhoods. And the one thing I'd say about Palm Beach is a great story today in the Post about New Yorkers suddenly moving there, is it's safe. Yaz and I tend to live in these hip, cool neighborhoods. Even West Sonoma is kind of not like Napa. It's like the kind of the cool, rugged, the extreme surfers. West Hollywood's definitely can be, kind of fun and dicey. And then even Palm Springs, it's not the Desert Golf Club gated communities. So the first time we actually felt safe in our neighborhood where we didn't need to lock our bikes was Palm Beach. So, and we got a small little apartment. It's really nice.
I want to tell you before we finish out, you put on an event at the Russian River called Inman Disconnect, and that was probably one of the coolest events I've been to or been a part of because it was very interactive, and you guys had a lot of cool stuff planned, and we stayed at these like cool cottages. That was really cool. Something really cool.
Yeah, it was people got on canoes and and marijuana was legal in California, so. It was fun. And that was the whole idea. And that's what I like about now, Chris, is then all the CEOs, and a lot of them were there, and they're just like the rest of us, they're a little toasted around the campfire with, and that's what, I don't know about you, but the last 2 months being in Refkin or Barton's living room and doing an interview where there's a great equalizer here,
Yeah. Well, Brad, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been great speaking with you and hammering you with all these questions.
This is the best interview. I love this. I had no clue this is the direction that you'd be going. I hope that I answered some of it.
No, it was great. It was really good. I wish you could have given me a little more insight on the show me the money segment, but that's okay. I appreciate your humble ways.
Yeah, you're the best, Chris. I really like you.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Be well.